Hello everyone, this is Menz here. I'm going to be breaking down the T110E5's armor here as of the 9.17.1 update. Now in this update, the E5 gets a slight little change to its cupola armor and also a couple little bits of its side hull towards the front here. This video is going to be corresponding with the weak spot guide I have over on wattguru.com. Feel free to check it out. There will be a link in the video description below and also at the end of the video if you want to hop over to that to get more details. Now, I'm going to pop up a little overlay here that I kind of clipped out from the weak spot guide. More or less, the T110E5's armor is still very good from the front. Basically, starting off with the lower hull here. It's one of the main points that people aim at, but the cupola is going to come back into play now after this update goes through. More or less with the lower plate, though, you find the very bottom part of it here is actually 266 millimeters effective. So even tier 10 tanks are going to bounce on it pretty reliably here. And then the main areas you're going to want to kind of focus at is, towards the edges here. Not too low because you could miss, not too high because you can hit the beak armor, but you have these little areas on the lower glacis that at its weakest is 176 millimeters effective. If you're looking dead on to the E5 and shooting right at it more or less, and it's not angled anymore. And then towards the edges it goes out to up to 219 millimeters effective. And then this little spot in the center here, it technically is weak at 198 millimeters, but it could be a little deceptive because right below it you have 266 millimeters of armor as far as effective armor values go, and then above it you have much stronger beak armor. That's pretty damn strong. At its weakest, you're gonna hit 325 millimeters effective armor. Now there is a small little flat part on the beak that some tanks can pen as 257 as far as its effective armor value, but actually hitting that is going to be pretty damn difficult. The rest of the hull, though, especially the upper glacis, is pretty damn tough, and the only way you're going to pen it is if you're shooting down on it or if you get some freak super high roll with a heat shell somehow. But moving on to the turret, before I get to the cupola, there's a couple, you see these little yellow, where my mouse is moving here, the little yellow strips to the left and right in the mantlet. These little flat parts are 203 millimeters effective, but hitting them is next to impossible for most shots. But if you are getting, kind of face hugged and for whatever reason you can't penetrate the cupola, it is an option. Not that it's easy to pull off, but it's still there. And then there's a couple little orange spots here next to the gun that I have drawn out here. They're 304 millimeters effective, but still hitting any area on the turret front, if it's pointing right at you, it's not exactly the best choice. Aim at the lower glacis or aim at the cupola here. As of the next patch, the cupola is getting simplified in a way, and also its armor values nerfed a bit. As you can see here, there is this little yellow strip here, basically in the center, but a little bit offset to the side. This area, it's 228 millimeters effective. It's 196.8 millimeters thick, has a 30-degree angle vertically and a 5-degree horizontal angle added to it. And then the remaining spots around this weakest area here towards the side and also to the other edge, they're 242 millimeters up to 260 millimeters effective. And then the very edges of the cupola are much stronger. I have a little red strip here, but I didn't do those values because pretty much you're going to bounce off of them. There's no way to pen them. But more or less, actually shooting at the cupola, if I can bring this image off, they simplified it in a way because that little machine gun port isn't really modeled anymore. It's still in the visual model, but as far as the armor model that your shell is going to be going off when it hits it, it's not there anymore, which is kind of good. It simplifies it, and it definitely it makes it a little bit easier to understand its armor. But more or less, the cupola, while it is nerfed in a way, tier 10s, for most tanks, it's about 50%, anywhere from 40 to 60% depending if you're a medium, heavy tank, TD, with standard rounds to penetrate the cupola here. TDs, they're certainly going to have an easier time penetrating it if they hit it well. Other tanks, there's a decent chance that you're going to not pen, depending on your penetration roll. Now, more or less, the cupola before, it had a very high chance of actually, say there's about, instead of there being, let's just go with 50-50 for tier 10s to penetrate the cupola for a well-aimed shot with standard rounds. Of course, premium's going to up that quite a bit. Previously, before this armor nerf, there was only about, say, like a 30% chance to penetrate for a well-aimed shot. So it does, it does nerf the cupola, but it brings it back in line with, basically having a low weak spot on the tank with its lower glacis, which is also very hard to hit at times, as far as where you want to, hitting those yellow and green areas, and having a high weak spot because its turret, while it does have a couple little weaker bits that some rounds can go through, it's pretty damn near strong. Now, moving on to the next image here, let me just get this set up. We have the side armor. Here we go. That's close enough. But moving on to the side, T110E5, of course, does not have very good side armor at all. Essentially what the current update is going to be doing for 9.17.1, it's nerfing this frontal area here. It used to, basically this red area, which is the thicker frontal armor, it used to kind of wrap around here, and basically this area in the front used to be over 200 millimeters thick armor wise. They nerfed that down to 76 millimeters. Like the weak spot guide on Watt Guru, it points out these specific areas a little bit more as far as what these values are talking about, but more or less the upper side hole here, it's a flat, the flattest portion, it's pretty damn weak. And then in the side here you have a couple little angled sections, little pieces of the track armor, but that's still pretty much anything you're going to be facing in the E5 is going to be able to penetrate that. And the lower side hole, it doesn't extend down pretty much below the top of these track wheels here. You're going to want to aim above that more or less. That's the stronger portion towards the bottom here, but more or less the entire side hole is weak outside of this little red section here where it kind of curves around into that upper glacis. Now the side turret, it's strong in parts, but it's also weak towards the back. More or less, looking at the side turret here, in this red orange section, it's angling towards the front of the turret, so that's the strongest portion. And towards the roof here, you have a couple angles going into from the side to the roof armor, so that's why that's stronger. As you get towards the mantlet though, that drops into that yellow orange range, so anywhere from 198 to 228 for the yellow point, and then 242 to 304 for the orange spot. But it is a viable spot to shoot at, but most of the time if you're aiming at the side turret and if it's completely side on to you and not angled in any way, you're going to want to stick towards the meatier part of the center / rear of the side turret, where it's much weaker here. That's between 139 here and 146 millimeters effective armor. This is 214, and then the cupola here, these green parts are 140 to 158, and then the yellow points, they're still under 228 as far as the effective armor here. They're just a little bit more well angled. So if you can't hit the side hull, that's your easiest bet as far as damaging the E5 side. There are parts of the turret that you can penetrate. And then finally, let's move on to the rear here. I'm just going to quickly glance over this. It's also in the article, of course. Let me just, whoopsie daisy. Let me just make sure this is lined up pretty well. There we go. But the side here, or not the side, the rear, pretty much straightforward. Hit anywhere that's not well angled. The cupola and basically the angled bits of the turret are the strongest points of the rear. But pretty much you're not going to struggle with this because most people are just going to shoot the rear hull or even the rear turret. It's the flat part of the back. It's pretty much the weakest point and very easy to hit. But hopefully you enjoyed this little quick video as far as the E5's armor guide here. I'm going to be doing more of these. I'm mainly going to keep it towards tanks that I think need it, more or less. I'm not going to be doing all my weak spot guides with videos, but I feel like it's nice to kind of have the article section on Watt Guru and also the video section to kind of talk about more specific parts. Getting into one last little detail, looking here, more or less the changes to the E5 on this patch, it's drastically going to hurt its angling capability. Like currently, before this nerf coming up, that thicker side armor here, where it kind of bent around as I was talking about, which they nerfed to 76, a lot of people kept shooting here because most tanks you shoot here and that's a weak spot. It was not a weak spot on the E5, and you know, oftentimes you get bounces or no penetration, or penetration no damage critical hits, and you're kind of like, huh? Well, it's definitely going to hurt the E5, where E5 drivers are going to want to stay pretty much perfectly straight on, if not just a pinch angle towards enemies, but it's going to make this part weaker if you angle here and you want to keep your side at auto bounce. Same thing with here, but it is going to hurt the E5 side scraping, you know, around corners and stuff capability. But anyway, thanks again for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. You know, feel free to check out the weak spot guide on my website and also other guides there as well. Feel free to check out my live stream as well here on YouTube several times a week. And thanks again for watching. I'll see you around. Have a good day.